All right. Good evening, everyone. It is so wonderful to see everyone in the room. We've had some people invited to our offices. We weren't sure it was going to be ready. So it's really, really lovely to have everyone here. Apparently the traffic is quite horrendous, so we might see people coming in, but we're going to kick off. We have about 300 people or so online. So everybody who's online, welcome. We're really, really honored to host you on our webinar. We have this very new fancy system, and I'm hoping that it's not going to fail us. All right, because there's a bunch of lawyers in the room, and so we don't have much hope from an IT perspective. Today is actually very, very special because it's the first event that we hold in the Fluid Rock offices in Rosebank. For anyone who's in the area, please come through for a nice cup of coffee or tonight for champagne. We really am very grateful and blessed to be here today. So just a quick view who we are so that you understand our perspective and where we come from. Fluid Rock is the leading independent corporate governance firm. We came together in 2018 and against all odds and all bets, touch wood, we have built a business where we're really, really trying to equip and help business leaders and governance professionals to navigate the storms that we face. And we're very, very grateful to all our partners, all our friends, all our colleagues that has helped us through this time and through this period. Our purpose is to live in a society fueled by ethical and well-governed corporate citizens, because we believe if that is in place, a lot of the rest of the good stuff will cascade into society. We have 7 divisions. Sometimes we have an extra one, so I must just check. Yes. So each of these divisions is really the job of one governance professional. We have just specialized. We specialize in helping boards and excos to become high-performing teams. You know, a lot of times there's some friction in the system. We help COSECs, or we are the COSEC. We have a statutory team that does all the normal statutory stuff, but also very strategic help with some very, very complex transactions, and many, many, many more. So today we have, of course, the famous Anne-Marie van der Merwe, who we are very, very lucky to call our colleague, who is with us. She gave comments on King 5, and she will be presenting King 5 to us. Personally, when I heard that we are doing a King 5, I thought it was going to be called the Van der Merwe 1. And stuck to the King 5. And I read the document, and I think it's such a nice shift. And I was wondering what are they going to change? What could they change? But I think there are some very, very interesting and very nice elements that they've brought in, which is definitely with the thinking of the times. I think my favorite one is the move from shareholder value to systems value. That for me is a very interesting one, but we are definitely going to hand over to Anne-Marie just now. I would also like to introduce, at Fluid Rock, we are a 95% female company, not by design. If you know any good non-female company secretaries, send them our way. But I do want to showcase one of our colleagues that's not a female. His name is Dr. Pieter van Vuuren. He just got his PhD. We're very proud of him. He's did some very, very interesting work on Gen Z and millennials in Africa and what drives them. So he's really, really an expert when it comes to leadership, to what drives people, what the different generations and how to build culture. He's got such a wide skill set. So we're very, very well. We're not quite sure why he's with us. It's so amazing. But of course, it's because in Afrikaans there's a saying which I'm trying to translate, but sort always seeks out the same sort, right? So let's go with that one. So without further ado, if I can please introduce Dr. Pieter van Vuuren to just take up to.
Thank you very much for that introduction. I'm going to work on my blush right now, and then it will get better a little bit on from here. So my responsibility at Fluid Rock, amongst others, is the academy and to drive our academy going forward. So I'm using the launch of King 5 as a great opportunity to do some propaganda for Fluid Rock and for our academy. One of the things that we as Fluid Rock, and if I just need to move on to the next one, please. One of the things that we are struggling as an organization, Fluid Rock, and I think surely you know in the COSEC and the board environment, is skill, talent. Finding talent and finding talent at the right level in a very condensed market. All we're doing is there's a great demand and very short supply, which makes our talent quite expensive. And we all are fighting each other to find the right talent at the right level. And we've looked at this specifically and we said, well, as an academy, we have to do something different. And we turned inside and we said, well, what do we need as an organization? And where are we looking for in terms of talent? For us, talent was then not just certification in terms of getting a qualification, but really getting to workplace application, to get our COSECs and our boards to be able to do the work in the workplace. And really that has become our focus in terms of that, and our development then focus specifically in terms of that workplace application. To do that, we then looked at a competency framework and we said, well, let us define a governance competency framework, the competencies required for different levels within the organization. And we've just developed 6 competencies for the governance function at different layers: foundational, intermediate, advanced, expert, and the board level. And all of them actually presents a learning journey for people at different layers within that. And for that, I'm very proud this evening to share some of the programs that we've developed at that. So the first part for us was to look at the foundational level. And the foundational level is a learning journey for people that really enters into the company secretary function, graduates, PAs to COSECs department. It's the bare minimum, the entry into our business. And we are proud to present 2 programs. One of them is a foundational COSEC program and also a COSEC internship program with ISO accreditation that we will take forward. The idea around this is that there's 2 different programs. One of them is specifically for 4 months, the foundational program, but the internship program is a 2-year program specifically for that. The first one is really about theory application, practical application. The second one takes longer because it's about workplace application. And this we have tested already in the 2 years gone by with some of our partners, Investec, APSA, that really have entered onto this program and have helped us define it and look at the internship program. So for us, this is at a foundational level, almost the entry part. Now, the trick here is that we are actually using this program to train our own people, because we believe that this is the right way to do, and therefore we're also offering that into the market. The second level is the intermediate level, and what we then started looking at is 2 programs as well, is a junior COSEC program, which is really theory and practice, 6 months program, repeated twice a year. But then there is an accredited program, a junior COSEC program for a year. And again, the difference between the 2 is quick, getting the basics done, but then at the later stage, the more 1-year program is with ISO accreditation. It focuses on workplace application. It talks about business improvement and really working in terms of that. You'll see the difference in timing, and you'll see the difference a little bit in this and the days spent on the program. And really what makes the difference is where we focus. It's introduction, and then workplace application, as you know, requires time. It requires time, application, feedback, development. We've also then looked at our COSEC program and specifically at an advanced level. And this is what we've seen in our programs before, is that we have COSECs that are already placed in organizations and need some help. Advanced COSECs, they're already there, they're doing the work, but they need specific work in terms of that. And part of that is basically the advanced company secretaries, governance managers, executives, board advisors. And our focus here is specifically looking at this role of the COSEC and how do I actually take this role to become a competitive advantage for my organization. And this content of the program consisting on a few things: a competency assessment, behavioral, as well as technical. It is a coaching journey where we actually manage it through, targeted with master classes, a community of practice where we bring these COSECs together to build a network, a support network in terms of that. And then, of course, also an action learning project where they then go back to the organizations and they improve the governance practice within that. And so for us, the advanced level company secretary program is really the one that we are excited about to take to market. Of course, this is COSEC. We've also then started saying, well, one of the things that we are finding is a request for directors at board level, people that wants to enter into that role, and we find that the learning process for those individuals is just so long. And we, again, looking at application very quickly, workplace application. Therefore, we're presenting the foundational non-executive director program, and basically an ISO accredited program as well. And so the idea really is to introduce our new directors or aspiring directors into the field of governance, taking them through the basics, the legislative environment, the governance environment, but then also what is my role, and then how do I actually manage that specifically. We do let them undergo the ISO programs so that they can have a global practice, best practice that we can use. And the idea really for this is also to make sure that they understand the different functions. And we can see that coming from our specific King 5 framework, regulatory environment, strategic oversight, financial acumen, etc. So for us, this is quite an exciting one. And then, of course, the part that we are always good at is the one where we are doing the bespoke COSEC and board programs, where we go to our clients and specifically our partners, and we start looking at how do we define programs custom-made for you to fit into your strategy and deal with it in terms of that. We present a series of masterclasses, and I'm not going to read through all of them, that really goes from a very technical to a very human aspect in terms of that. Our benefit that we do is we do provide continuous professional development points that you get for that program in terms of that. So one of them is basically the King 5 application workshop, and that's what I want to flaunt right now and ask you on the 4th of February. Following tonight, we are actually having a workshop specifically for governance professionals to take King 5 and to translate it and apply it in your own business, and to assist you through a process of a workshop of how does this impact us and how do we deal with that. So what we want to do is to say to you, reserve your seat now. There is a future for us together, specifically on workplace applications. So, and we really invite you to do so. For what is the process, we will send all of this to you. So you will be getting an email from me telling you all this information, and also the opportunity to reserve a seat and to actually start planning your calendar for next year. So for me, that gives me a great opportunity to say thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to be a propagandist. And then, of course, sell our programs. I'm handing over to this team, Annemarie van der Merwe, to talk about then what you came for, King 5.
Thank you. Thank you. And just a note, let's see who's awake and attentive in the class. What was wrong on the previous slide? God, I know you would, girl. She would know. Bob.
February 25.
Well done, well spotted. You know, we did that on purpose to check whether.
Thank you.
We were listening to him instead of reading.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for the opportunity. For those of you online, for those of you that joined us, this is very new. So it is also something I'm still trying to get my head and my hands around. So don't, bear with me if I don't get everything 100% correct. I'm going to try my best. So we're really going to and I'm going to start a little bit, and you have to excuse me. So maybe, if for those that do not know me, because Ronel said I'm famous, but you must realize if you're blonde and you're van der Merwe, you could be famous for very kind of different kinds of things. I just want to make sure that we're on the same page as far as the famousness is concerned. And I always say my claim to fame is that I grew up in the corporate trenches of South Africa, and I have the scars to prove it. And as a result of that, I am going to, before we go into the detail, I'm going to get a little bit philosophical with you about King. When I was looking at this slide, I thought I should maybe share with you the story. At my last meeting as a member of the King Committee in 2020, November, I will never forget, I was on the King Committee for 13 years. And I've always believed that one should leave while you are still loved. And I thought I was pushing my luck, after 13 years, and it was time probably to move on. But at that meeting, I said to the chair, I would like to leave the King Committee with one tip. And I said, when one day you are ready to publish King 5, do yourself a favor and put a watermark on every page. Now I'm disappointed to see that they didn't pick on my recommendation, because there's no watermark if you have seen King 5. And what did I say should be on the watermark? It should read, apply your own, and you could even use a character, minds. This is not a tick box. This is not a checklist. This calls for intentional application of mind. And if we can just get that message to land, I think we will really take a huge step forward. I've been around the corporate corridors, and I think my colleagues and I that work that we do, I want to say hundreds, I don't think I'll be exaggerating, feels like that, board evaluations, doing governance opinions, and having to give advice most of the time when there's a breakdown in relationships, when things have gone south or sour, whatever way you want to put it, and having seen the consequences of the absence of proper rules of engagement and processes and procedures. I wish some of those that do a lot of kind of either being very flippant about the King reports and how useless it is and how little value it is, and that it just stifles business. I wish they can kind of come into my shoes for a few weeks and days to see what I see in organizations where there is an absence of governance. And I can see Cara is nodding here because she's agreeing with me. And that was kind of the reason why, when on Friday I also joined the King launch online. And yes, of course, it is important that we deal with the legal stuff. The King 5 trademarks, copyright belong to the Institute of Directors, and we must acknowledge it. Yeah. And it's also understandable. They've put in a lot of blood and sweat and tears to bring it for us. So we appreciate that, and we always acknowledge their role and their ownership of the intellectual property of the King report. So I find just on Friday, as I said, after attending the launch, I posted this on LinkedIn, and it's a little bit busy, but I just want to read to you what was on my heart when I did this. I said, it's here and it's great, but will this new code truly drive the change we need? And I said, I challenge people to reflect, on the approach to King. Is it just, for them still something where they must tick boxes, which is highly irritating for most people? Or will we see a genuine shift in behavior? And I've probably become a little bit cynical after 34 years in corporate corridors because of what I have experienced. But I will always live in hope. Tomorrow as long as there's hope, we will continue to spread the gospel, so to speak, because as Ronelle said, we honestly, FloatRock team, we get up, we show up, we dress up every day because we honestly believe that a society that is fueled by well-governed and ethical corporate citizens can make a difference, that they huge. I don't want to go into all the technical, academic stuff, but they're the biggest user of the resources, and therefore they have a responsibility as well. And that's really our commitment. But I really want to challenge you still, with all of you being online. I think we've got like 300 now online, and those of you with us in the room, I want you to kind of just take a moment before I get into the detail, and I'm going to ask yourself, why are you here? Why are you interested in this topic? Is it because you really sincerely also buy into this? Many years ago, I wrote an article, which I think appeared in the IOD's magazine, and the heading was, "Is corporate governance overrated in South Africa?" And people say, "Oh, you're a member of the King Committee," and then you ask a question like that. I said, read my article. And my article was in response of allegedly a shareholder activist that will go unnamed for tonight, who had said that Steinhoff is another example that the King report is of no use. And I was getting a little bit. There's a beautiful, Renel was using Afrikaans translation. I can't translate the word "gatvol" completely, correctly to kind of give across the emotion that goes with the frustration. But it's really to say, how many times must we say, we can write King reports till we blue in our face. In the absence of ethical and effective leaders in our boardrooms and the corporate corridors, we can have many more Steinhoffs. They all just come one after the other. The King report is a framework, and it is as good as the people that use it. And that is where my appeal is for leadership, to really apply the mind and really kind of do a bit of introspection. So why are we doing this? Is it another, because the JSE is on our back? Or because there's, institutional investors that now, and I read this week that somebody made in an article said that our investors and our fund managers are dropping ESG, and they were comparing to something that the president in America was dropping, I can't remember, because Bill Gates apparently said that climate change is no longer going to result in the demise of the world. Now, apparently, all of a sudden, ESG can go off the table. And like, guys, it's got nothing to do with that, but anyway, so it's that kind of what we see that is part of the frustration. And I think I'm not really the only one. Before I go there, I want to just quickly read to you a good friend of ours at FloatRock is Carolyn Chalmers, and we work closely also with her and the Good Governance Academy. And Carolyn also posted something, and what she said just resonated with me so much. She said, and she started off by making the point that the release of King 5, she says, marks an important step in South Africa's governance journey, but it's not necessarily a leap forward, but it's moving in the right direction. She says, yes, it strengthens governance structures and disclosures and requirements, but it's, like I said, it's a framework. It's not a remedy. It remains a framework that will eventually is as good as the behavior that's of the leaders behind it. She says, it can close the gaps where misconduct hides, but it cannot on its own create integrity. And I'm not going to continue reading everything she said, but just when I read that, I'm like, sister, you understand, you read me, and you feel me, and I feel you. We share because we, with what we experience every day, that need, and from our side as well, for people to really get it, if I can use that terminology. And I was so excited this morning. So Anne Crotty, the journalist, when I saw this heading and I saw this is Anne Crotty, I'm like, Anne, I've known Anne Crotty for many, many years. She's an investigative journalist. And I sometimes tongue-in-cheek called her the Erin Brockovich of South Africa, and she's a tiger. I mean, if a company, it just seems like they're not, doing things properly, and will be on top of you, like a ton of bricks. And she's to date been quite critical of the King report as well. It's got no teeth and it doesn't mean it. And all of a sudden, it's like, wow, finally some muscle. But this article appeared in The Currency, which is an online publication this morning. I would really recommend that you go and read it. It's still not completely positive about it. She still shares some of her reservations about, and making the point, none of Steinhoff, Tomgaard, you name it, that list, were ever charged with non-compliance to King. And I fully get it, but what, potentially they could be charged with, the directors, is a failure in their duty to act in good faith and with care and skill and diligence, which is their statutory and fiduciary responsibilities. And we know that the courts have started saying, well, if I have to judge the behavior of the leadership of this organization, whether they did act in good faith and with proper, care and skill and diligence. What do I assess their behavior against? And well, the King Report is a very valuable tool. So in that way, although the King Report is mandatory, and we've always said, and if I can quote a Prof. King, you can't legislate for morality. That is just absolutely the reality that we need to understand. We really need those ethical leaders to buy into, to see the value. And that's so important. And Ronelle, I always say she's a governance strategist on steroids. She really gets the way in which governance is part of just a strategic enabler for organizations and not a stifler for business. And if you can get that and you see that value, hopefully we can get more of those buying into. So I've already kind of alluded to this as well, that part of the King Report, and maybe let me just take a step back. I mentioned my article about, so is corporate governance overrated? And then I said in that article, there are only two groups of people that I would encourage and recommend to read the King Report. The one group are those who, like me, do not have a life, because Friday evenings, when everybody else is out having fun, I read books like Reimagining Capitalism. That's my definition of a great evening. Or Net Positive, the book that the ex-CEO of Unilever wrote, with a subheading, How Courageous Companies Thrive by Giving More Than They Take. And that concept on sustainable development, on the interconnectedness, on the we need one another concept, responsible capitalism, if you want to call it that. If that concept speaks to you, then I would absolutely encourage you to read, the King Report. The other group of people that I would encourage to read the King Report are those who may not completely, they may still be like Milton Friedman, believe the business of business is business, but yet they realize that they may be sharing, although they want to be upstanding, ethical, business people and leave the company better off than they found it. They may realize that they are sharing the boardroom with some that have different, ethical compasses and moral compasses. And therefore, there are chances that things are going to go quite, south quite quickly. And so if they want to protect themselves, then part of that would be to show and to be on record that they at least attempted to implement proper governance. So from that perspective, I always say Companies Act, and I put the King at the back of it. I say, this is cover your back stuff as well, apart from everything else. But we have seen, the King Report has got the claim to fame that in 92, the Cadbury Report was published in the UK. The first King Report came in 94, and it was the first governance report globally that actually spoke about, and that brought this whole concept of sustainable development and stakeholder inclusivity onto the forefront. So the King Report, I think, and Prof. King has been acknowledged, I think, probably got more recognition internationally than in his own country, to be quite honest. But, he was a key driver behind that. And one day maybe he'll tell you the story as to why that is and how it came about. But what the Constitutional Court said not too long ago in 96 again, if you create a company and you use the resources and the funds and the capitals, the 6 capitals, you must know that there's responsibilities that will come with that. And this is what's the part of that. These are part of the consequences of operating in companies. I'm going to try and catch up from a time perspective, so I'm going to go quite quickly through some of the slides. Why King 5? What were the objectives with King 5? Well, they were developments. It feels like yesterday that we launched King 4. It's like 9 years ago already. Time flies when you're having fun, I suppose. But there's been developments, and locally we know the Companies Act is in, it's out, it's there, half a foot in, half a foot out. But we've had regulatory developments. There's been developments globally and all different governance levels in Europe with disclosures on sustainability as well. And all of those developments made the King Committee say it's time maybe to relook King 4. They wanted to, I recall I was really blessed to be and honored to be part of the small 10 people that I always say, I don't say we wrote King 4, I say we pulled King 4 together, because it was the brain, what's the work of many people, but we kind of collated it all and brought it into this document called King 4. And I recall from King 2, I think my King 2, I could actually kind of seriously hurt somebody. You know, it's quite a document like that. King 3 was a little bit less, and then King 2 reduced even further. And I recall one of the criticisms against this, you are watering down governance now, you know, and you're not actually building, and now I'm not sure what they'll say, because it's even less pages than what's in King 4, but they did try and simplify to, you know, to make it more understandable, to drop some of the jargon, and so that it's really relatable and people can understand, you know, hopefully what the intent is behind it. The big thing, and this is what Anne's article that I mentioned showed you earlier on, one of the big changes, and at the launch on Friday, Ansi Romalu, the chair of the King Committee, said this is probably in her mind the biggest change, is this whole, the way that they're going to, how it approaches disclosure. And that I will enhance on that a little bit later, but there's a different approach to disclosure. And in the hope that we really, I think this is the intention, that there's more meaningful quantitative disclosure on the one side, and more transparency, also, you know, alignment, so that you can compare apples with apples as well, and consistency in the reporting. That was part of the driver on why they looked at the disclosure regime. And they also say, and this is what Anne Crotty, it's kind of a tool, it will be a tool to assess the performance of companies and their leadership, and to hold them accountable. So Anne is saying she sees potential for more accountability from stakeholders if you do the disclosure correctly. And of course, what is going to be interesting to see how boards are going to do this. They require, if you say that you apply King 5, you are going to be required to use the disclosure framework, which I'll show you now. And it has to end off with the board saying, we are comfortable that in the way we operate, we are successfully achieving the desired outcomes of the King report. So put your money where your mouth is, brother. You know, it's going to be interesting to see. And this is King 4 was still one single document. What they've done now, they've kind of deconstructed it, they say. So, and this is quite important to understand. King 5 is 4 separate items that together form King, that, you know, is King 5. And it's the one thing that you must understand, because I saw many people take King 4, the book, and they would go immediately to the code and read the code. I'm like, did you look at the glossary? How do you understand what value creation means if you do not look at how we've defined it? Do you understand the thinking behind King 4? If you looked at that section of King 4, and, you know, you could see kind of often the blanks there. Now, what is concerning, but I need to flag this, those sections, those subsections of King 4 has now been put in separate documents. So I really want to encourage you and appeal to you. You cannot read the code if you've not read the foundational concepts, if you do not understand the glossary. And if you're only going to read the code and you forget the disclosure template, you're also gonna have egg on your face. So it's important that when you go, if you're going to go onto the website, and if you're on the website, look at these different documents. They've also already published a guidance note, and they say that they're going to, what may be perceived as gaps, they're going to close with more guidance notes. The first guidance note is on monitoring and enforcement, you know, talking about internal role players, external role players like regulators. And I must say quite a number of regulators have endorsed King 5. So, you know, that will hopefully also have a positive impact as well. So it's very important to understand the makeup and the structure of King 5. Then very quickly, not much have changed here. The concept about ethical leadership, those foundational building blocks of King 5 now is very similar to King 4. Ronel also already alluded to the idea that moving from where we started with shareholder premises or the shareholder being the king, the move to stakeholder to the value, for stakeholders, which is now moving more into system. So the thinking behind this is when we moved to just the stakeholder value, it was more about, okay, how can we, as part of doing our business, do a bit of good, and help a soup kitchen here and pollute less there, and we feel all good, and we shine in our integrated report, and we move on. And what the King report is trying to say, you are missing a large part of the puzzle, and that is the risk. Because we've seen so much, degradation in the kind of the stability, what they talk about, the socio-ecological stability of the world we live in, the risks that bring to our organizations, we are missing. And that is why you need to understand and look at your organization as being part of a system. You're part of this larger system. And the reality is, if that system is not healthy, it doesn't matter how good you're trying to be, your business will suffer. So it's that whole thinking on system, value creation is very important for us to understand as well. The Ubuntu, we spoke about Ubuntu in the previous from King 1, but now it's in the code. They refer to Ubuntu in the code. I got a lesson not too long ago when I did training in Cape Town for a Lesotho organization, and that kind of showed you that you're never too old to learn. I was reminded because the person said to me, you know where the concept of Ubuntu comes from? And I had to honestly say, no, actually I don't. I know it's an African, and he said, it comes from our chief Mashlomi, who lived from, let me get my dates right, 1720 to 1815. And was like the leader of the Basotho nation. They themselves, Lesotho has got the Mashlomi code, that's their governance code. And he's, kind of, it takes a village to raise a child. What happens in one village will impact on another village, etc. So those whole concepts of interdependentness, Ubuntu comes from our neighboring country, from Lesotho, but it's very much become, and I think the Boto who's the Sotho speaking. Yeah, Ubuntu is the Zulu, I think. I've remembered that. The Zulu word for what it's trying to. So that, and this is, and I really am hoping for those online, and I'm looking at those in the room with me. If you can get this, hopefully it will help you greatly in the way that you approach the King 5 report, and should have approached previous King reports. They are outcomes. We are saying, what is governance? Governance is the exercise of effective and ethical leadership. That's what King 4 said. King 5 adds the words within the social, economic, and environmental context of the organization. Leadership that results in certain outcomes for the organization. Guys, everyone should strive to achieve those outcomes, whether you're listed, non-listed, public, private, public sector, private sector, for-profit, non-for-profit. You should strive to achieve those outcomes. To help you to do that, we gave you 13 now from King 5, used to be 17. We're giving you 13 principles. Those principles are universally applicable. Same. Any organization should strive to apply those principles. To help you to do that effectively so you can achieve the outcomes, we're giving you more than 100, nearly 200 recommended practices. That's where the application of mind comes in. It's recommended practices. Okay, and if that and where also the proportionality, because it depends on the size of your organization, the complexity of the business, the workforce, the industry that you operate in. We have a client just down the road from here who the other day I had a call from them about a compliance policy. And the argument was, do we really need a compliance policy? Because we only have 60 employees. Number one was the question. Number two, but then my response was as well, look at the industry that you operate in. Your industry have got huge implications for the environment. So you have a huge public interest. The public have a huge interest in you as an organization. Things need to be done correctly, appropriately, and they completely, got it. There was no counter arguments about that. But that's the thinking behind it's been before, and nothing has changed. Here are our outcomes. That's not changed substantially. Still try to achieve the outcome of the organization, having an ethical culture, and is known for that ethical culture, for value creation. And as hopefully by now you understand that what I mean with value creation is not just putting more money in the pockets of shareholders, but it's value creation in really looking at the impacts and the 6 capitals and the resources, human and financial, all those that we use in achieving kind of our purpose as an organization. The third one used to be, I've already forgotten, effective control. You see, I'm already on board with King 5. King 4 was effective control. They've changed that to conformance, which sounds a little bit like ticking the boxes, but it's really about making sure that there is, compliance and that there are prudent control. And all of these are defined so for help us to also understand. And then how much are your organization trusted? Or you say you are or want to be? Is that what, the outside world actually experience? There's that separate book. I'm not going to go into too much detail, part of the King 5, which is the foundational concept. I really want to encourage you to read it. It gives in great detail what's the definition of governance, explaining the law and governance. I've just tried to earlier on alluded to as well. The legal status of King, which in itself is a topic, for a whole evening. Who it applies to, I've already explained to you. I think the scope of application, the building blocks, and then the disclosure. And then it goes into quite a bit of detail. And again, if you like me, you will love that section about the sustainable value creation, what it means, what it looks like. So I really want to encourage you to read that. What are some of the changes? So I've already mentioned to you, they tried to simplify it. We've got less principles. I'll talk to that just now. There's this dedicated disclosure framework that you really need to apply your mind to. And again, I want to urge and encourage you, don't see that as a checklist. It looks like one. I will admit, it looks like one, but it's not meant to be. It's meant to be a tool, to be a guide, to help you, to actually apply your mind to where you're doing, what you're doing and what you're doing well and what you're doing not so well. And one of the changes there as well, they now will expect you, where you decide, not to actually adopt one of the recommended practices, that you should actually explain and highlight it and explain why you've decided not to adopt that specific recommended practice. But then how do you live the principle so that you successfully achieve the outcome? That will, is what that disclosure framework helps you to do. I'll quickly talk about double materiality just now and about AI. How did we get to 13? It was when the draft, some of you who read the draft, I'm sure all of you, I want to kind of, for those online as well, say, put up your hands. Who read the draft when it was out for public comment? Come on, be honest. Oh, there's a few. Thank you. And I'm sure some online did read it as well. And you may recall when it was out on draft, it was 12 principles. Now, how did we get back to 13? In the previous draft, they were going to combine compliance and risks, and there was a lot of discomfort with that. So they've split that again into 2. So that's why we have 13 principles. They combined. So what they did as well, they took principle 5 that speaks to the role of the board as, the champion of governance, and the principle on board evaluation. They took that principle and they all made it part of principle 1, because they say they believe it's part of ethical leadership. So that's in one principle. They combined the principle about organizational ethics and being a responsible corporate citizen. That's into one principle as well. So that's how we and then they dropped principle 17. Now, if we had time, we'd do a test. What was Principle 17? So Principle 17 was about responsible investment. Okay, so we're back to CRISA on that, and we don't have time to go into the thinking, but that in itself is a good topic to discuss one day as well. So just to give you an idea, these are now the 13 principles that form part of King 5. The leadership, the ethics, strategy, reporting, composition of the governing body, committees. Principle 7 talks about delegation. There comes risk and compliance, which has been split. Data, information, technology. That is probably of all the recommended practices. I'll talk to that now, but that is the one that were most affected and changed, I think, absolutely for the good. You now would agree with me. It was, I think, very well done, and the King Committee should get a clap on the back for that. Remuneration we'll talk about quickly as well, and then assurance and stakeholders, which still talks about group governance, which is a topic that Kara and my colleague Kara and I, battle with organizations to understand, to get to grips with, and understand the importance of proper group governance. So what's one of the things that changed? This concerns me a little bit. I did when the draft was out, this was something I commented upon. I was kind of asked to review the final draft of King 5 just before it was published, and I again raised the concerns around this because of the work we do in doing independence assessments. I do think we're going to have to go back a little bit to the drawing board on how we do it. I also want to say that I think the way King 5 talks to independence now is going to really call on a lot of increasing intellectual honesty of board members, because the responsibility is going to be on the shoulder of the board to look at the factors and then themselves come to the conclusion whether or not somebody can be categorized as independent. The definition of independence remained the same. It now also includes related parties. So they broadened that, which is quite aligned with the Companies Act, we know as well. An interesting one for me, the cooling off period. If an executive did not have a cooling off period for at least 3 years before they come onto the board, they can basically never be categorized as independent. You can decide, but it's now one of the factors that you must take into consideration. If they did not have a 3-year cooling off, that would be problematic. And then finally is the 9-year tenure. And for that, one evening, bless you, we will have a kind of another round of champagne or something stronger, because we need to talk about tenure. It's something which is quite close, and for me as well as a topic, and that I have my own views on. I do not think it must be a rigid approach, and let's see how this is going to land. But yeah, I think it's really going to call on boards. And I mean, Kara and I are on the receiving end sometimes when we do independent assessments, where the pressure is on us to categorize somebody as independent, where we can clearly see that if you look at the definition of an informed third party's view, you can't call somebody independent or categorize them as independent. So let's see how this is going to land. I already mentioned the data, technology, information. There's really now the whole issue around kind of how we procure, how we use it, how we develop it, how we dispose, and how we distribute. And of course, disruptive technology and AI and the ethical. We've got one of the authors on the AI, ethical use of AI in the room with us as well. So I'm talking to probably come and talk about that itself. But so it's really, I really want to encourage you, all organizations, to go and have a look at Principle 10 and the recommended practices and the understanding, recognition of data, information, and technology, and how to deal with that in its separate compartments, but also together. Remuneration, I have a question mark. Why do I have a question mark? So I want to know how much you get paid. No, that's not why I have a question mark. So we're waiting for the Companies Act. That's why I said earlier on, Companies Act is in, it's half-baked. The section around, the provisions of the Companies Act for public companies to now, by law, be required to bring their remuneration philosophy, policy, and implementation report to shareholders is not yet effective. And what King is saying now, once it becomes effective, it says to, and I'm glad they did, because this was something I raised with them as well at the draft that, I reviewed. It just said all other companies should continue with the practice of non-binding advisory votes. And I just said to them, sorry, in my experience, small PTY limiteds and non-profits are not going to do it. So where they did land is to say companies with a public interest score that requires them to have social and ethics committee, they are recommended to continue the practice, of non-binding advisory votes, but there's no consequences or anything. You must decide what you do with it yourself. So there's a placeholder on remuneration, and we'll see where the law lands. This whole concept about double materiality really again talks about, on the one side, there's the single materialities, which very much the focus on the financial impact on us as an organization. And that's what our investors and analysts are concerned about. What does it cost you to reduce your carbon emissions? And what will this cost? And how much money is this going to take from shareholders now? And, kind of very much the financial inward focus. And impact materiality is also to say, well, we should also look in the mirror at ourselves and look at how we impact. What is the impact, the value that we create for, not only the organization, but our external stakeholders, and the impact we have on environment and society, etc. That's what's called double materiality. And reporting on sustainability is going to be based on double materiality. So reporting both on single materiality and impact materiality. So I'm going to conclude so that we finish on time. Still apply and explain. Which is what I've already explained, that you apply the principles and you explain how, and you explain why you decide not to adopt some of the practices, and how in any event you think you're doing well in living the principles so that you can achieve those outcomes. It is, as I've already mentioned, this disclosure is really to try and enhance transparency and accountability, and hopefully that is what we will see. And I think at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, it remains a tool. It remains a framework. And, the point I always try and make, and I quote here one of my ex-King Committee colleagues who wrote an article a couple of years ago also on this topic about governance, and she ended off the article by saying, it is the values that leadership bring to the table that culminates into the culture of organizations. And she says, I want to argue that governance codes is a framework. Your behavior, no, don't shut down. Thank you. Thank you. Your behavior is really what ultimately will culminate in the culture of your organizations, and that will drive responsible corporate citizenship. And this is really, at the end of the day, this is what we're aiming to do, and what King 5 says, and I want to quote, in this way, it's not a set of rules, it's a strategic tool. And I know Ronel would love those words, a strategic tool for building resilience. It makes business sense, is what we're trying to say in simple terms as well. Maintaining your credibility, and that is what will bring the money as well, attracting the investments you need, and at the same time, being a meaningful contributor to society and to the environment in a world that's just constantly changing and kind of, may I say, falling apart around us at a quite rapid rate. So here's let's see who's awake. What's wrong on this slide? You picked up on that already. So I'm going to end off with that and hand back to Ronel. Thanks for those of you online, and thanks for those of you in the room. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna-Marie, for that very cryptic and good overview. I do want to open for questions, even to the people online. And let's see how many questions we can take. Ayanda.
Yeah, I think the first one is just on the applicability, because as I was driving here, I was asking myself whether it was going to be compulsory across the board, because there is corruption everywhere in our prisons, but we know where corruption is the most. And working for a JSE listed entity, I'm already subjected to this. So I was worried about my other sisters in the other end, because I think this is one thing that would bring in the conscious element, ethical conscious element to a board when it is with our boards. That's the first one. And then my second comment is in relation to tenure and independence. I think what I like about KingCalc is that it aligns more with your prudential authority rules in relation to 9 years long, so we know exactly where we stand, and there isn't that 50 shades of grey. Because I think personally we need to move towards a certainty tenure arrangement so that we all know and you can start planning again. So there I like it. But what I was asking myself is why the launch now? The sequencing and maybe the timing. Because I would have thought they wait for the Companies Amendment Act to land and then come out with this. So the launch and the timing thereof threw me out a little bit. That I thought maybe that would have been cured by the writing. I have not read this. Frank about that. I'll only read it in December. But the timing. What are we?
All right. So I think there are three things said to you. So first of all, let me answer the first question about the timing. They did it as a favor to me because I said, if I will have to wait for the Companies Act to become effective, I may have to go to the retirement village where I don't have internet and I can't read King. I'm just joking. So, how long do you wait? We couldn't wait anymore. So I think that's they just had to kind of make a decision, make a call to go out with it. And it's not major. They've tried to do it in a way that there won't be major impact. So I think that's the one question. If I go back to your first point about I've learned in my life, and my colleagues, I think, will bear me out on this. Those companies that do not take this, do not see the value in governance, they tick the box. It's window dressing. There's very little real impact on it. In fact, it just kind of teaches them to be more corrupt and to be more clever in the way that they hide things. So if there's not somebody holds them accountable. So that's what the whole idea or thinking is, to say this whole new disclosure framework. Hopefully that will help to kind of, have higher levels of accountability. And then, of course, and this is why I do the training that I do with directors, and I explain to them, yes, as I said earlier on, those are the two groups of people to read King. If you don't buy into the concepts that fundamental concept of King, that's good for you, but understand that for your own protection, you need to apply your mind to this and do a proper job. Because if there are corruption and things going on, the ship is going to sink. This ship is going to sink, and you're going to sink with it. So it's, from that, for self-preservation, I strongly recommend, which is not the stick that I want to use, but I think that's the reality. So all directors, public sector, private sector, need to understand it. It is how governance is how the practical, actually, King 5 says it somewhere in one of those documents. It's the practical implementation of your statutory duties is what King is. And we need leadership to understand it. Then on the 9-year rule, I agree with you. Look, you said it's good because it aligns with the Prudential Authority. I don't like the Prudential Authority. I like the Prudential Authority. I don't like their rule. And why? Because research tells us that the good directors actually kind of peak between 7 and 10 years. So to take them out in 9 years, you could really be, look, a non-performing director on the board for a year is too long. Okay, let's just say that to one another. But a good value-adding director. So 9 years for me, my view, and I think they do it in France and some other countries where it's 12 years. That's the line. But between 9 and 12, you take them to shoulders every year and explain to shareholders why you think they should continue to be categorized as independent. And the comment was made by my good friends at the IOD and the King Committee on Friday, because this point was raised about independence, and some made the point, well, it's not that you have to stop being a director after 9 years, you just can't be categorized as independent anymore. And I'm like, exactly, that's our problem. We need independent non-execs because we need to, compose our committees correctly, etc. I cannot, with all due respect, we do not have the liberty to accommodate non-independent NEDs unless we want to create huge boards. So I think we need to, our wish was that hopefully that we'll take a more pragmatic approach to it. But yeah, let's see where it lands. So thanks for that.
Thank you, Anne-Marie and Ayanda. So online, there's a question, when will it be finalized? So it is finalized. If you think something is missing, you can always write to the committee for Kin 6. But when is it to be implemented?
So it is effective for your financial years starting after 1 January 2026. So that's when it becomes effective. So anybody with a new financial year will have to adopt this and apply.
Can I ask you something on that, Anne-Marie? So, I mean, let's say our year end starts, or our year end is 31 March and our first day is 1 April. Would you then be required to align through that year and report the next year? Or, for example, independence, would you be immediately deemed to be not independent?
I think you can choose now. You would, yeah, and it's not like that. It's an automatic non-independence. It's application of mind by the board as to whether that has an impact. Okay, so I think just understand that they do say that it is for financial years starting after 1 January. So if I have a year ended March, then I can still report on King 4 for the financial year. However, they do encourage early adoption to the extent that you can. So we will probably have a little bit of this hybrid that we had last time as well, where they spoke about King 3, King 4. We will kind of King 4, King 5 it for a while during 2026.
Well, I think with that one, it's going to be very interesting. If your board in that year finds that you weren't independent and your MOI said that if so many people have to be independent, you're going to find yourself in a situation. So I think what's interesting, especially with independence, is you need to almost be an early adopter.
Yeah.
So that you don't fall into that year. It's just an interesting
That would
effect.
be a good idea.
Let's say, are there any other questions in the room?
So I quite like with King 5 now. I mean, we know the role of the board is to set the strategic direction, group policy and plans, oversee and monitor, and then accountability. So what I like per principle that it's kind of split that. So it's pretty clear now, so you can see what is in terms of the direction, what is in terms of accountability, etc. So that I think is great. I think when it comes to the independence, I would have maybe, and I haven't really read the disclosures, the glossary yet, that document, but more on the materiality. Because when we say you're a material supplier or contractor, you have your shareholding. I think sometimes you take guidance from the listing requirements, but if you're speaking broadly about private companies and that sort of thing, I wish we could elaborate further on what we mean material, because that's what I think we always get pushback from, but no, it's not material to my personal wealth. I mean, you say, well, 8% is, so I kind of wish that was more defined, but I wanted to get your perspective whether there could have been more on the subsidiary governance. Now, you said earlier, we struggle with group governance when it comes to, I mean, King 4, King 5 still says there should be a framework in place. There's a direction, a group direction, but I often find that subsidiary governance is neglected, and I want to put that in inverted commas. And we always say we should actually put out articles about that because of, we see companies or subsidiaries be treated as divisions as opposed to, actual legal entities. So I'm wondering, could have more been done on subsidiary governance?
So I just want to quickly tell you, I was also glad to see how they split it by the roles. And if I can say, we tried to do that with King 4 as the task team. That was our suggestion, and the committee kicked us. Said, no, this is you just making it too complicated, and that was dropped off. So I was really glad to see it in King 5. And of course, the other thing too, if you look at the King 5 code at the top, it kind of every page, maybe that's the application of mine. It says, adopt practices and live the principles so you can get to the outcomes, on every page. But yes, it helps us to understand how the board steers the strategy, the policies it approves, how it oversees, and how it ensures accountability. Kara, on group governance, I fully agree with you. It is something, in fact, when I was reviewing it, King 5, one of the comments I made was, and I've not checked whether that was adopted or incorporated, it was not only for me about rolling out a group governance framework. I said there should also be adherence to it. There should be, I should make sure that people adhere to the group governance framework. I need to check whether that came through. But it's like everything else, Kara, to how much detail do you go? It's the concept of understanding that material subsidiaries need to be well governed, and that every entity in a group of companies are subject to the same statutory rules, and directors of a subsidiary, even a wholly owned subsidiary, has the same standard of conduct, the same duties as a holding company director. And very often we see, you and I, we see the kind of a rubber stamp approach to subsidiary directors, which really not only puts them at risk as individuals, but it even puts the holding company at risk. So yeah, I agree it would be great, but we need to work with what we've got.
All right. I've got two hands up, so I'm first going to go two hands up with your side, so please.
Just a big question that comes to mind about director retirement ages. We often get that question from some of our clients. And is there a direct direction maybe that the King codes lean towards 70, 75? I know that maybe it's internal discussions, the board applying its mind, but do you think perhaps there should be actually a stipulated age at which directors should retire?
So I've been a champion of this for a while, but not in the way you think. I don't believe we should be ageist on our board at all. I mean, I've seen people who are 40 who's maybe a little bit senile, you know, with some of the discussions. I've seen 80-year-olds who are crisp as a daisy. So personally, and this is the King doesn't speak about this, and I think it's because it's such a because Prof King is 88, so let's not let's not judge. But it is when COVID hit and those boards started meeting, the people who are calm were the people with experience,
More mature.
Now, I'm not saying that was not the young guys, but the people who have seen summer movies, who have been hit around by life a little bit, who knew how to just focus on the key principles and steer the ship forward, were the ones, in my view, who saved some business. So I don't know why. I mean, some people who are more mature, as you can say. So some people who are more mature might be a little bit difficult when they, you know, if they can't work IT, or, you know, it can be irritating. It can be, you know, there can be some obstacles, you know, in that case. And a lot of times, you know, that could be a reason. If those people,
I'm so sorry that I pressed the
So I think it's much more about having real conversations with people. And if you think someone is not adding value, to have that conversation, or to deal with the issue without trying to put age related. I mean, I'm actually saying I don't think people who are too young should be on board, because they are disruptive, they are destructive, or there's an absolute alignment to the status quo and groupthink. So you think you're going to get the young voice or the youthful voice, and you don't. You're actually creating risk for your board because you are filling a position with someone who doesn't have experience. By all means, put people there as observers. Well, I'm not a fan of observers either, but I mean, find some program to develop.
Take them to third round.
Well, do these flu drug people have something going about develop people as directors? Put them on. I was going to say our subsidiary boards, but not that. I mean, some of the boards that poses the most risks to directors are non-profit companies. And if people want to get experience, we often say to them, you know, find yourself a non-profit, but that is a very risky place to be. In fact, rather be a JSE listed than a non-profit because of the risk. So it's a very interesting question, the question you're asking, but I would go back and say, guys, we are not ageist, just as we are not any of the others. But what we are looking for is we're looking for competency, we're looking for skill, we're looking for. One of the things that I'm missing on boards more and more, I always walk in and I'm going like, where's my cowboy? Where's my entrepreneur who's going to drive this business? Because I have CAs, I have lawyers for days, I have governance people, but where's our business people? So they're falling off because those are the very people who will not do their chartered directorship. Now people are saying when they recruit, they're saying you have to have a chartered directorship. I promise you the cowboy entrepreneur is not going to do that. So I'm not saying don't ask for it. But I'm saying have a mix of people on your boards. And when we talk about diversity, because that's actually where it comes down to, is have a diverse group of people who think differently. Because we can look diverse, but think the same. And that's what I've got to, you can hear, I'm like, I've got to think about this.
I
Yeah.
want to, I just on that point, what you just said also spark thought in my mind on what I asked earlier about tenure. I'm much more also to that point that Ronald just raised, much more in favor of where I look at kind of the 4 quadrants, the very, recent appointments, the medium, which is getting a little bit longer, and then my stalwart, and have balance there. In other words, for me, the average tenure of the board is more important than trying to take out those that are long serving. So it's application of mind once again, like same with age.
Yeah.
I just
Well,
want to
I'll question
say,
and then that's other thing.
I just want to say, I also think it comes from a premise of a lack of courage. It's a tactic to move out the older board members, but it's about developing that courage to really think about the board, what's the best interest of the company. And if the person needs to get out, regardless of age, they need to get out. But sometimes it's used as an excuse because there's no courage, there's no.
Absolutely.
We've seen that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Yeah, so first, I'm just going to the lady with the yellow and then
It's empty.
oh,
Sorry.
oh.
Right, thanks for the conversation. I actually have got a few points, but I wanted to first maybe contribute to the 9-year age conversation. For me, I think what is quite important is when you look at the company, when the data was there in that 9-year period, how had the company shifted? 1, from performance, 2, from strategic direction. Because if you actually think about the application of the mind, there are quite a few data that are wise, right? But you realize that actually the company hasn't moved in 9 years and hasn't made any changes. So for me, I always look at how has the company itself performed in the year that the data has been in the company for 9 years. And I think something that we must think about when we're speaking about this topic. But I also wanted to raise, I think Ayana touched on it, to say, we're staying off with Zondo Commission, we're on the Mazala Commission, we're on this commission. And one of the things that I would have expected from King 5 to actually draw out all these learnings from all these commissions, and then say from King 4, what is missing, that then enforce the responsibility and accountability of directors, whether it's private or public. I mean, we've seen staying off, which is much more listed in private, and public, which is seen under commission and all of that. Because then if you actually put that out and then you say, this is how King 5 responds to these current issues that we've seen, building on King 4, I believe that the reception of King 5 would be very clear. The fact that we're moving from 17 to 12, and people are like, what are you doing there? Right. So that's my first comment, which I made the same comment when the first draft came out. And I actually did implore the King Commission to actually bring the top 20 listed company secretaries, bring them in one room and speak to them, because I think there is a voice that is missing in King in relation to that. That's the second point. The third point to this, which is my second last point, is how is King 5 relate to the JSE with this initiative of harmonization of the listing rules? Because we know that there are quite a few areas that overlap between the King and the JSE, and how do we expect to clarify some of the things that are coming through the JSE that are relating to King 4? And then probably the last point that I wanted to just double check is around double impact, right? We have single impact, we have double impact. I think in the past we had those 6 capitals that we use, manufacturing and social, and and I think the question from my side is, are we really understanding the execution of what that is? Remember, we had the triple bottom line where we spoke about all those 3 things, which I believe that King 5 kind of gravitated to that. And, is there therefore a clear understanding of what that looks like in real application of double impact? Sorry, I'm
I'm going to respond to one or two things, and then Ronel can maybe also, because also think we need to start wrapping up. I think number one, I completely hear you about the lessons learned. I think somebody must write a doctorate on the lessons learned through, especially Zondo Commission, and I think I will still want to say, it's a King as a framework. So what the King Committee did say that where, what they want to focus more on as a committee is kind of guidance notes to look at the gaps, to look at the lessons learned and bring out guidance notes, because the reality is ultimately what we're saying, we need ethical leaders. That's kind of, we need people who embrace governance, who understand it. Then the rest will, you actually, I'm going to sound like I talk against myself. You don't need a King code, in fact, if you really have strong ethical leaders, but it gives you those kind of the practical side as well. So I think if we were to really try and talk to all the lessons learned, you would go back to the size of King 2. So that was also part of it, but I hear you, and we've got to try. And the company secretaries, that's something we did, and Ronel can talk to that as well, bringing company secretaries together as a voice. And now that we have the facility with the new offices, where we're going to be told that it's time to go.
Yeah.
We're going to definitely do that, and this place is going to become a hub for the voices of company secretaries. No, okay.
Yeah.
You've got seen the budget.
I've got it in there. Thanks, Anne-Marie. Okay, let's take our second last question, and I have a question.
Organization.
Okay. All right, let me just say, JSE, I think we will find, that's what the JSE was waiting for as well for King, so they will align with it. And when we see the simplified listing requirements, I think they will be aligned. And there was a question online, let me quickly answer that, because it talks to the double materiality to some extent as well. The JSE says, and the reporting, IFRS reporting standards that we're going to adopt is going to be based on double materiality. So it's not a King requirement, but King does say it buys into a concept of double materiality. And it is new. It's something to get our head around. That's where the whole concept of integrated thinking comes in. That will lead to integrated reporting. So actually, if it's been done correctly from already historically, it shouldn't be such a major shift for companies. But it's again the approach and the understanding and why we're doing it. The why. For me, the why is always so important. If I get my why, the how and the will follow automatically. And Paul, let's quickly.
Yeah. I'll just pick on your last point, which is the how. Right? The why is clear, and it's the how. If you look at successes of corporate performance and governance, and failures of performance and governance, there's something in between that is common, and it's behavior. It's direct behavior. So my question is, do you think that King 5 devotes enough attention to director behavior? And by behavior, I don't only mean ethical, right? I mean business judgment, independent mindedness, right? Rigor, analytical. What happens in the room? Yes, what happens in the room? We spend a lot of time talking about what happens outside the room, right? Whether that's sustainability or conformance with one rule or another. I don't think, or rather, let me ask a question. Is there enough attention paid to what goes on inside the room, which can prevent the sign-offs, EOHs of this world, which aren't failures of, technical accounting. There are failures to speak up, to be independent-minded, to question, all of those things. Is enough attention paid to those leadership behaviors?
I do think, once again, similar to my response earlier, that, you can go into so much detail. If you look at that first principle about ethical leadership and those I craft, the integrity and the competence, which I think should be courage, competence and courage, responsibility, transparency and fairness. Look at those principles. And you look at, when we do board evaluations, for example, we can very quickly see whether a board is doing a board evaluation to tick a box, or whether they're doing it because they honestly want to do introspection. They honestly want to make a positive contribution, leave an organization better off than. So yes, and that's to me why I keep on saying sometimes I just get so despondent. And I'm like, why am I doing this? And then tomorrow morning I get up and the sun shines and I'm like, okay, I'll try again today, to go and talk about this, to spread. And I made the point the other day that I believe, I want to believe that I'm helping to plant the seeds. And maybe my grandchildren, the 5 of whom one is 8 years old today, I have to say, happy birthday, Mila. But, hopefully one day they will see the fruits of what we've done. But I really want to just encourage us as men not to stop talking, spreading the word, lecture training, developing people.
I think as a closing remark, I can say that, of course, the media focuses on so much negative. And we hear the stories. A company that's improved slightly because of good governance is not going to make it on the headlines. We see it daily, where a lot of directors are trying their best and they are growing companies and they are improving and they're moving forward. So even though we have to focus on the negative, we must also remember about the vast majority of things that's positive. Because a lot of directors, and I would say the most directors don't wake up in the morning to go, how do I destroy this business today? Of course, you have those people and they are doing well as well. But a lot of people are trying their very, very best to do well. And one of the things that we do, and Anna Marie has been saying that I love strategy and linking into governance. If you, everyone or all companies will have to now amend their board charter in terms of reference and whatever. And it's a massive opportunity to say, this is what we are as a company. This is our strategy. This is King 5. How do we overlay all the capitals you were saying about the capitals so that you actually help your committees delegate those oversight of these pillars to the committees? And then that helps your organization to know where to report to. It frees up your board to have oxygen to be future forward thinking, future ready. And that's a real opportunity to really use governance as a value driver. I see governance as a value driver, a protector of revenue, a protector of margin, protector of reputation.
Strategic enabler.
Strategic enabler. So I think really, you learn, I'm never too young to learn. So that's the stuff that's really exciting when you start seeing it in action, where you can see companies are more streamlined. They have more headspace to perform, to reach their objectives. So it's really actually, it's not for me a two-dimensional document at all. So it's very exciting. So what I, like Anna Marie said, is we moved into this space because we wanted to have a place where it is the home of Fluid Rock, but it's also the home of governance professionals, a home of directors, a home of people. We want to have these sessions. It's so nice to network, to meet new people today, to widen your network, and to just know, share the learnings, the challenges, share learnings. We might not have answers, but it's just a space to connect, and that's what we're trying to do. So please, before I close, Ayanda.
Yes, I'm just going to be opportunistic here. Do we have any intel on why we don't have government provisions at the Companies Act? Okay.
The only reason I can think is the regulations aren't ready. So it's a regular. Remember our Companies Act today that we have 2000 and became effective to 1st of May 2011. What's the date of the act? 2008. It took 3 years for it to actually become effective. Now, these are a few sections. Let's hope there are not that many regulations, but I do think that's the main stumbling block. Ladies and gentlemen, I think in closing, thank you to those online. I think really what Ronelle and I are trying to say is, well, governance is a journey. Just start somewhere. Start with King 5, start to really kind of get your mindset right. get your hands and your heart around it, and just see what, if you go onto that journey, what it can do for your organization. So we thank all of you online, and also for your patience for us for the late start, for which we apologize. But thank you for joining us this evening, and for those with us in the room, let's go and have some water.
Well done. Right, you can switch this off. So everyone in the room, I mean, we're saying goodbye to our colleagues online. Any comments from your side instead of questions? What's your feeling of King 4? No feeling as yet. Yeah, we don't have that in January.